sees the silver sun, you best walk her away and watch it shine.
And then for today's What Matters to Me speech, Mr. Buensuceso will be speaking. He's the Director of Cultural Competency at Berwick and has been here for 6 years. He coaches the boys cross country, and his favorite Marvel character and movie is Black Panther. Please help me welcome Mr. Buensuceso to the stage.
Today would be a great day to take pictures, a colleague said to me one day during my first year on the hilltop. Not knowing what they were referring to, I smiled politely, nodded my head in acknowledgement, and continued walking. Thinking that I didn't quite hear, the colleague said again, a bit louder this time, "Great day to take pictures." By this point in the interaction, I realized what was going on. Berwick Academy is my third independent school, predominantly white like the others, and at each space, it is a common experience for me to be confused for one of the other adults of color on campus. For those that were here in 2015, being mistaken for Arlie Mulana was a regular occurrence, the only other male of color on campus who happened to be Asian. His hair was black like mine, but in my opinion, that was the extent of our similarities. His skin color was lighter than mine, his body type much more slender than mine, and also he was a bit taller. The shape of his face, eyes, nose, mouth, all different, and he was significantly younger. He worked in Burley-Davidson like me, but was in communications. When he wasn't behind his desk, he spent a lot of time behind the camera, trying to capture Berwick in action. He left at the end of that year to pursue a graduate degree, but his departure unfortunately did not mark the cases of mistaken identity for me. Over the years, I've been asked about the middle school schedule when I've been confused for Mr. Singleton, our former middle school director, who is Black African American. I've been thanked by a parent for presenting an award that Mr. Beelan, who identifies as Asian American, so graciously presented at 8th grade baccalaureate. And over the last couple of years, I've been welcomed to Berwick and asked about my transition from Brooks and how my family and I liked living in Hayes House. I'll admit that last one happens less now that I have a full head of hair. When I've chosen to respond and make the correction, I'm often met with a look of astonishment, a nervous giggle, some version of, "You two look so alike, you could be brothers," and a quick sorry that's left me unsatisfied and even more unsettled. More to come on this. Amidst this past summer of racial reckoning, as dubbed by NPR, a movement began within predominantly white independent schools across the country, most of which have thriving and long-standing diversity, equity, and inclusion programs. This movement on Instagram has been described as an outpouring of stories, anecdotes, and experiences by Black students and Black graduates of independent schools of being on the margins or of feeling othered within their school community. For those of you who might be hearing this for the first time, on Instagram, search the phrase Black at. Take a closer look into the 60 schools that might show up on your results page, and you'll find over 6,000 posts that describe their experiences. An alumna at a prominent New York City independent school who has posted on her school's site stated while being interviewed by CBS News, "While it's painful, it's also unifying to see, all of these students and faculty and parents coming together and expressing their stories." Ms. Pollard and I have been exploring these statements with students of the Upper School Diversity Club and during our gatherings with faculty and staff. Their reaction is consistently of shock, awe, sadness, and disappointment, mostly focused around the sentiment that schools should be safe places for all students. Here are 7 that caught our collective attention. Quote, "I was always apprehensive about wearing box braids to school. Once I finally got them, I remembered everyone in the dorm, my sports team, and random people would touch my hair without asking. I am not a dog to be petted and touched without asking," end quote. Quote, "I've been told by numerous of my white counterparts that they don't see color, not understanding how ignorant that is. I'm very sure they wouldn't have said that to me if I wasn't Black," end quote. Quote, "There was a kid in my dorm who always yelled a different Black kid's name in a song in place of the N-word," end quote. Quote, my white male English teacher forced me to read a line from a play that included the N-word. He wouldn't let me skip my turn or not say the word. He didn't care when I was visibly upset and started crying, end quote. Quote, as a black female student, I was constantly mistaken for other black female students. Once I even had a 5-minute conversation with a faculty member who came back to me after our conversation was over and told me she thought I was someone else, end quote. Quote, I still remember the name and face of the student who said we should feed the illegals to the sharks and be done with them in the middle of my foreign language class. The teacher did not address the comment until I made a fuss about it. And finally, when Ferguson happened, teachers would talk about current events, and there were always so many students that had such nasty, racist things to say, and they were allowed to say them because they were entitled to their opinion, end quote. I've gone through hundreds of these, and they're tough to read, not because I'm surprised by any of them, but because there are so many of them in one place. For years, these stories have been shared with family in the privacy of dorm rooms and with trusted adults. They've been the topics of numerous articles, research, and local and national conferences. While I have not seen a site specifically dedicated to Berwick, I've been told that we had our own Black at Berwick moment before I arrived in 2015, when a group of students of color shared their experiences with adults. Their experiences, similar to what I shared, made them feel excluded, marginalized, and unable to be their authentic whole self. So began the work of cultural competency at Berwick. I would venture a guess that despite our best efforts in this area, offensive statements, jokes, and memes are still passed around beyond the earshot of adult or within the confines of social media. Over the years, when situations like these have been brought to our attention, ideally they have resulted in a teachable moment for students, with deans, administrators, or even the school's honor committee. At times, though, the reporting student will be solid in their commitment to not wanting to get the other person in trouble, and the teachable moment becomes difficult and less apparent. So what happens when a person is confronted with having committed a subtle or unintentional act of discrimination? What if you are that person who has just committed a case of mistaken identity? Within these interactions, in my opinion, too much focus is placed on the intent, whether a person was malicious or not. Did they mean it as a joke? Or maybe in their point of view, it was a common mistake. Not enough emphasis is placed on the impact. Feelings of being othered, marginalized, excluded, isolated, and less than whole. What if at that moment, rather than trying to defend your actions, time was spent in dialogue, understanding, and empathizing on how that action may have made the other person feel? This consideration for what the other person is going through may lead to an apology, a simple intervention, but you would be surprised at how ill-practiced we are at giving authentic apologies. It's a skill, quite frankly, that I've been practicing in earnest for over 20 years as a parent, spouse, and partner, as I've committed more than my fair share of mistakes, misspeaks, and misunderstandings. Let's break it down. First, affirm and empathize. That must have been hurtful, painful, or that was an uncomfortable and awkward moment when I referred to you as Mr. Hamilton. Second, apologize, and not in an I'm sorry that you feel that way, more in the spirit of I'm sorry that I've caused you pain, or I'm sorry I did that, I wasn't paying attention. And finally, some sort of restorative action. What do you need from me? Or I'm going to try hard not to do that again, despite you looking as tall as Mr. Hamilton. In all seriousness, now, the key to any good expression of atonement is to affirm, apologize, and act. Upon further reflection of the 6,000 posts on Instagram, it is a reminder to me that all schools, regardless if you have engaged in diversity, equity, and inclusion work for 5 years or 50 years, need to continue to be intentional to create a community where all students can be their authentic selves, regardless of race, gender identity, ability, class, religion, sexual orientation, and other identities that historically have been marginalized on campus. As members of that community, we need to have difficult conversations on these topics in the classrooms, within peer groups, on sports teams, and at home. The work we do here and now, although local, will help in the long run to redress systems of inequality and continue us on a path toward a more just and equitable Berwick Academy. That's what matters to me.